Whenever the topic for records of assists in the NBA comes up, you're probably going to start to think about point guards in the 80s, 90s, and early to mid 2000s. There was John Stockton, arguably one of the greatest point guards of all time, partnered with Karl Malone. And then there was Jason Kidd and Steve Nash. From the late 90s to early 2000s, arguably the two best point guards for passing in the NBA. But the thing is, none of those great point guards had the record for most assists in one game. The question is, who did? This guy, Scottie Skiles, 30 assists in one game for the Orlando Magic against the Denver Nuggets in 1990. Okay, now unless you're an Orlando Magic fan or you've seen 30 for 30 this Magic moment, the question you're probably asking is, who is Scottie Skiles? Scottie Skiles was born in the small town of LaPorte in the state of Indiana. Scottie Skiles went to Plymouth High School in Indiana. And in his time in high school, he would score a total of 1,788 points. In his senior year, the most points he had in a home game was 53. And an average during the 1982 high school season, he'd average 30.2 points per game. And then he would go on to lead Plymouth High School to a state championship where he'd win in a double overtime game against the Gary Roosevelt Panthers. And after a pretty much dominant high school basketball career, surely the NCAA, right? There was no doubt or question whatsoever that Scottie Skiles was going to go to a very good Division I program in the NCAA. And he decided to enroll at Michigan State University, where he'd become a Spartan on the basketball team. By his senior year, he was a first-team All-American selection, as well as a Big Ten Conference MVP and a scoring champion. By the end of his career, he was the all-time leading scorer at MSU, scoring 2,145 points. And he still, to this day, holds a record for the most points scored in a season at 850. Next stop for Scottie Skiles, the NBA. The question would be, what round would he get drafted? See, back then, there wasn't 2 rounds, there were multiple rounds. And again, there was no question whatsoever, could Scott Skiles play in the NBA? He'd go first round, 22nd pick from the Milwaukee Bucks. But his first few seasons in the NBA weren't so easy for him. He'd only play in 13 games for the Milwaukee Bucks in his freshman year in the NBA. And then for 2 seasons with the Indiana Pacers, he really struggled to get into the rotation with less than 7 points per game. Thank goodness for the expansion draft, because a place in Orlando would be a better situation for Scottie Skiles. Skiles would be picked up by the Magic in the NBA expansion draft, and this is where his career started to change. Now, the move to Orlando was exactly what Scottie Skiles needed to really propel his career and to become a dominant point guard. But in his first season with Orlando, in the 1989-99 regular season, he hadn't really solidified himself. He had played in 70 games, but only started in 36 of them. It wouldn't be till the next season where he would start in 66 of those 79 games he'd play in, and that's when his stats would improve. He'd go from 7 to 17 points and 4 to 8 assists per game. This is how big of a move it was for Scottie Skiles coming to the Orlando Magic. Now, if we look at Scott Skiles' stats in his first season with the Orlando Magic in 1989-99 regular season of the NBA, on March 20th in 1990, he had a triple-double in a win against the New York Knicks, where he had 23 points, 12 rebounds, and 17 assists. Going into his second season with the Orlando Magic in the 1990-91 regular season of the NBA, the month of December, Scottie Skiles would go off. In December, he'd have a matchup against the Portland Trail Blazers, where he had 27 points and 18 assists. Later that month, just before the Denver Nuggets game, he'd face off against the Houston Rockets, where he'd have 31 points and 17 assists. Now, you have to remember, before this game, when Scottie Skiles set the record for most assists in an NBA game, the Orlando Magic had only had 2 years in the NBA. Well, a year and a half if you really think about it. But in that time, they didn't have a very good head-to-head against the Denver Nuggets. In their first season in the NBA, they played them twice, lost both. First game, Skiles is on the bench, doesn't play that much, 0 points. Second game, Orlando lose emphatically by plus 30 points. Skiles plays a little bit better. Now, in Orlando's second season, they play away at Denver, and Skiles has a better night, again comes off the bench with 15 points. The question is, can Skiles and the Orlando Magic finally break this curse and beat the Denver Nuggets? As soon as the ball went up, the game was on. And Scottie Skiles, he wasn't doing anything fancy, no behind-the-back passes, no no-look passes, anything like that. He was just finding his open teammates. He had Dennis Scott, Nick Anderson, Terry Catledge. I mean, he was just finding these guys at the right time, and they were repaying him the favor by making the open shots. Now, the Denver Nuggets were coached by a guy called Paul Westhead, and his philosophy was run and gun, get the ball at the court as quick as possible, get a quick shot, and they actually averaged the most points that season with just under 120. But the problem was they would concede 131 per game. Former Orlando Magic teammate Jeff Turner, and now currently basketball analyst with Fox Sport Media, said that one of the reasons for Skiles' success as a point guard for getting the assist record was his ability to read defenders, read his man, and read his teammates' defenders too. And that's how he was able to pick out so many passes in this game. In the first half, it was never a competition. At the end of the first quarter, Orlando did hold a slender lead of 35-23. But by the time that Skiles had dished out his 14th assist, Orlando was ahead 72-49 by the end of the first half. They were absolutely cooking the Denver Nuggets. As they moved into the second half, the game tempo didn't change. The Magic stayed on top. But the thing was, they really benefited from the run and gun style of Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets just weren't hitting shots. And every time they got a rebound, the Magic would go in transition. And who would lead the way? Scottie Skiles, racking up more and more assists as the game went on. By the end of the third quarter, the Magic had a 30-point lead, 110-80. And Scottie Skiles had broken into 20 assists. And the thing was, he was getting closer and closer to the previous record, which was held by former New Jersey Nets guard Kevin Porter in 1978 with 29 assists. Was Scottie Skiles on his way to breaking the record? As the game progressed into the fourth quarter, there was never a question whether the Orlando Magic going to give up a 30-point lead to the very desperate run and gun style of the Denver Nuggets. The question was, and what all the analysts were saying on the radio, was Scottie Skiles going to beat that record for most assists in the game? Well, he did just that, obviously. But the thing was, Scottie Skiles probably could have racked up more assists in this game. But in his type of game, he was still scoring. He would be coming up the floor, hitting big shots. He racked over 20 points in this game. 20 points over, along with his 30 assists. That's how good a player he was. The Orlando Magic had 8 players finish with double figures in that game. Top scoring with Jerry Reynolds. He finished with 27. Terry Catledge did what he did best, and that was dominate with 25. Dennis Scott with 18, and Nick Anderson with 17. Now the question many are going to ask is, if someone like Scott Skiles broke the record with 30 assists, then his mindset was, I'm just going to dribble the ball up and give it away every time. But that was definitely not the case. Scottie Skiles, along with his 30 assists, had 6 rebounds, 2 steals, and 22 points. There is no question that this guy's mindset was, I'm just going to give the ball up. He was out there to prove a point, to read the defense, and more importantly, win the basketball game. But in the end, history was made that evening at the O Arena. Scottie Skiles would break the assist record in the game with 30 assists. There's been a lot of great point guards in the NBA. Magic Johnson, Jason Kidd, Isaiah Thomas, Steve Nash, the list goes on. But remember, the player who has the most assists in one game was Scottie Skiles for the Orlando Magic.